Section 22 of Through Fairy Halls of My Book House. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Candace Stellick, Dallas, Texas. Through Fairy Halls of My Book House. Edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. The Luck Boy of Toy Valley by Catherine Dunlap Cather. In a chalet high up among the Austrian mountains, blue-eyed Franz was very unhappy because his mother and brother Johann were going to Vienna and he had to stay at home with his old grandfather. He bit his lips to keep back the tears as he watched the packing of the box that was to carry their clothing. Then his mother tried to comfort him. "Never mind, lad," she said. "I'll send you a present from Vienna, and we'll call it a luck gift, and hope it will bring you luck. If it does, you'll be a lucky boy." He smiled, even if he did feel sad. He had often heard of luck children, for among the Tyrolean peasants there were many stories of those who had been led by fairies to have such wonderful good fortune that ever afterward they were spoken of as the elf aided or Glückskinder, and it was so delightful to think about being one of them that he forgot his sorrow. Of course it would be very fine to travel down to Vienna and go into the service of a rich noble there, as his mother and brother were to do, but it would be still better to be a Glückskind, and such things sometimes did happen. So he did not feel sad any more, but whistled and sang and helped with the packing. Early next morning the post chaise rattled up to the door, and Johann and the mother drove away. Franz watched them go down the winding white road, calling after them in sweet Tyrolean words of endearment until they were out of sight. Then he went back into the hut and began to sandpaper some blocks that his grandfather needed for his work. The old man was a maker of picture frames, all carved and decorated with likenesses of mountain flowers, and these, when sent to Innsbruck and Vienna, brought the money that gave him his living. The figures were too fine and difficult for Franz to carve, but he could lend a hand at fetching blocks and sandpapering. He worked with a vim, for Tyrolean boys think it a disgrace to shirk, but all the while his thoughts were on the luck gift. "I wonder what it will be," he said to his grandfather. They took turns at guessing, until it was time to feed the goats and house the chickens for the night. A week later the man who had driven Johann and his mother away came by on his return from Vienna, and Franz fairly flew out to get his gift. "It is something very big," he called to the old frame maker, as he took a bulging bag. "See, it is stuffed full," and he expected to find something very wonderful. But when he opened it, he thought it wasn't wonderful at all. There was a blue velvet jacket, trimmed with gold braid and fastened with glittering buttons, such as Tyrolean boys wore in those days, and in one of the pockets he found a shining knife. "Well, of all things!" he exclaimed, as he held them up for his grandfather to see. "It's a splendid jacket, and the knife is a beauty, but I don't see where the luck part comes in." But Hals Berner was old and wise, and a knowing smile played over his wrinkled face as he spoke. "It won't be the first time luck has hidden in a knife," he said, as he bent over his carving. Franz did not know what he meant. He had always had a knife, for being of a carver's family he was taught to whittle when he was a very little fellow, and he had become remarkably skillful for one of his years. But no wonderful good fortune had come to him, and he was very sure that although each of the presents was nice, neither would bring luck, and he sent that word to Johann. But the brother wrote back from the city, "It will surely turn out to be a luck gift, Franz. Just wait and see." And still the boy wondered. Winter came and icy winds blew down from the peaks. There was no word from Vienna now, for the valley was shut in by a glittering wall, and travel over the snow drifted passes was impossible. There were other boys in the village, but each had his work indoors, and there was little time to play. So Franz had no chance for games. He helped his grandfather part of the day, and sometimes whittled for his own amusement. It was a lonely life there in the hut, with just the old frame maker, who was often too busy to talk, so Franz was glad to do something to keep him busy. Now he made rings and tops, and then just fantastic sticks or blocks. One day, as he whittled, his grandfather said, "Why don't you make an animal, Franz?" The boy looked up in surprise. "I don't think I can," he answered. "Not unless you try," came the reply. "But if you do that, you may surprise yourself." Franz hated to have anyone think he was afraid to make an attempt, so he exclaimed, "I wonder if I could make a sheep." "Begin and see," the old man advised. The boy went to work. At first it was discouraging. After many minutes of whittling, there was little to suggest what he had in mind. But then, with an occasional turn of the knife by the frame maker, and now and then a bit of advice, the boy began to see that a sheep would grow out of the block, and when it did he felt like a hero who had won a battle. "It wasn't a bit hard, was it, lad?" Hals Berner asked when it was finished, and Franz agreed that it was not. That was the beginning, and every day thereafter Franz worked at his whittling, and animal after animal grew under his knife. He was so busy he did not have time to be lonely, and had quite forgotten how sad he had felt over having to stay at home. It was such fun to see the figures come out of the wood and feel that he had made them. Of course they were crude, and not half so handsome as those his grandfather could have made, but anyone could tell what they were, and that was worth a great deal. By spring he had a whole menagerie, and when his mother came home she found he had been a busy boy, and a happy one as well. "All made with the luck knife," Johann said as he looked over the work. "So grandfather says," Franz answered. "It's a splendid knife, but I don't see where the luck comes in." And again the knowing smile went over the old man's face. One day soon afterward his mother had word from the man who had been her employer in Vienna that his little son was not well, and he was sending him to regain his health in the mountain air. A week later the child arrived with his nurse, and the first thing that attracted his attention was Franz's menagerie. "Oh, oh!" he exclaimed. "Dogs, cats, sheep, goats, lions, elephants, and all made of wood! I want them." "He means that he wants to buy them," his nurse explained. "Will you sell them, Franz?" For a minute the boy hesitated. That menagerie had meant many months of whittling, and he loved every animal in it, and if Johann hadn't interrupted, probably he would have refused. "Why, Franz," the brother exclaimed, "it begins to look like a luck knife after all." That put a thought into his mind that caused him to answer, "Yes, take them. I can make some more." So, when the child went back to Vienna, he took a wooden menagerie from the Tyrolean mountains. Other Viennese children, seeing it, wanted to possess one, and orders began to pour in to Franz, far more than he could fill. Then other villagers took up the work, until all over the valley people were making animals and toys. The work grew to be a big industry, and toys from the Grodner Thal were sent all over Germany, and even to the lands beyond. One generation after another went on with the work, and although it is 200 years since Franz began it, the craft continues there to this day. At Christmas time, shops in every land are filled with toys from the Tyrolean mountains, and although they do not know the story, thousands of children have been happier because of a peasant boy's whittling. So out of the bag sent back from Vienna there came in truth a luck gift. And it wasn't the fine jacket either, but the knife with which Franz whittled his first sheep. The boy had found out that luck doesn't mean something sent by fairies, but the doing a thing so well that it brings a rich reward, and although he lived to be a very old man, he never got over being grateful that his mother made him stay behind when she and Johann went to the city. The little valley among the Austrian Alps is still called Grodner Thal on the maps, but because of the animals and toys that have come out of it, it is almost as well known by another name. If you are good guessers, you can surely tell what it is, especially if you know that the peasants still speak of the lad who made the first menagerie there as the luck boy of Toy Valley. End of section 22. Recording by Candace Delic, Dallas, Texas.